Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today in the studio we have with us Steve Taylor. Hi Steve.
Hi, nice to be here.
And Steve has written his book here, which is called Waking from Sleep, Why Awakening Experiences Occur and How to Make Them Permanent. So the last bit's actually a very brave title. Yeah. But let's start, Steve, with why you wrote the book in the first place. What was the motivating factor?
Well, I think the main motivating factor of all my writings is to try to understand the human psyche and understand how we can possibly shift from the normal state of consciousness into a higher state of being or a higher state of consciousness. So, really, I'm trying to understand the sort of I'm sort of investigating spirituality from a psychological point of view and trying to understand from a psychological point of view what actually happens when we have awakening experiences or spiritual experiences. And once we understand what happens, then it should be possible for us to understand what it would be to exist in a permanent state of wakefulness or high state of consciousness.
And where did your interest for this subject come from?
Well, partly from my own awakening experiences. From quite a young age. I mean, I'm not somebody who had a dramatic spiritual transformation at some point in their life, but I always felt that from the age of 15 or 16, I always felt I was aware of a spiritual sensibility in myself. I was aware of feeling a strong sense of connection to nature. And even though I was brought up in a very urban environment in Manchester, I always loved to sort of walk in the fields or the park, and I felt a strong sense of connection to natural things. And I loved open space and solitude and the stillness of nature. So, yeah, all through my life I've had what I would call awakening experiences, and I've always, sometimes they come and go. Sometimes you get into a sort of plateau of wakefulness where it seems to last for quite a long time, but then you get stressed or busy in your life and it seems to go away again. Then it comes back for a while. So I've always wanted to understand why these experiences occur, why they go away, and I think that's my main motivation.
And what to you is an awakening experience? And I'm talking about you personally.
Well, I've always had, I've mentioned already that I've always felt strongly connected to nature. And that's why I've always loved romantic poets like Wordsworth and Shelley, because they write about these powerful spiritual experiences they had in the natural world. So for me, I've always had spiritual experiences in nature. So my wife and I, for years, we used to love walking in the countryside and just taking in the beauty and stillness of nature. And for me, and I think for most people in general, spiritual experiences are, first of all, when our surroundings come to life, the world suddenly becomes more real. It has a quality of isness, which isn't normally there, in beauty. And also, it comes alive as well. Seemingly inanimate things have a being, like stones, rocks, rivers, even sky, the clouds. They can seem to be full of a consciousness or being. And then, at a slightly higher intensity, we feel a sense of oneness or connection with the world. And we feel compassion and empathy for other human beings, for all living beings. And we also may have a sense that the whole world is filled with an energy, a consciousness. I often have this sense that the whole world, the sky, the fields, everything around me is pervaded with this energy, or a kind of consciousness energy or spirit, which is, in the Upanishads, it's called Brahman, this all-pervading spirit force. So that's a part of it too.
How is that for you when you feel that?
When I feel it, well, it's a bit like, it seems so natural. When it happens, it seems so natural. It's kind of like, this is the way things really are. This is stepping beyond the normal experience of separateness into oneness. And it's kind of an exhilarating feeling, which is also quite serene. It's not sort of ecstatic, exciting. It's quite serene. It fills me with a glow of serenity. And there's a definite sense of how, wow, this is the way things really are. All things are one. All things are pervaded with the same energy.
Because I know you start your book in the introduction with experience you had when you were 22 years old. And I think you were working for the Social Security Office.
That's right.
And you just got some bad news about a girl who, case you were looking after, died. And then you went out for a walk. I think you were walking home from the office. And then you had a real mystical experience in one way, didn't you? Do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I had those experiences from the age of 16 or so.
Yeah.
But for a while, I didn't really understand them, and I kind of didn't accept them because they were so different to my environment, and I didn't have a framework to understand them.
So you couldn't talk to other people about them?
No, I
really?
couldn't. I thought there was something wrong with me, you know.
Really?
I thought, why do I feel so
Yeah.
different to other people? Why do I feel this attraction to being on my own, this attraction to nature? Because nobody else knew it was like that. But by the time I was 21, 22, I discovered spiritual texts, and I'd started to go to meditation classes. So I suddenly understood these experiences, and I accepted them, so they began to happen more often. So in that particular experience, I remember it very vividly because it was one of the most powerful experiences I'd had at that time. And I was just walking home it was actually by the motorway in Manchester, not again a very urban environment, not particularly beautiful. But I remember just gazing at the sky, and because I just found out about somebody who died, I remember just feeling this amazing sense of gratitude that I was alive. I felt very sad, but at the same time I felt, wow, you know, I'm incredibly lucky to be alive. You know, it could have been me. So this gratitude kind of led me into a positive state, and I remember staring at the sky, at the clouds, and all of a sudden they had a new dimension of oneness. They were no longer separate. This energy flowed through them and dissolved them all into oneness. And it was the most beautiful sky I've probably ever seen. It was just glowing with isness and beauty and wonder. And yeah, the whole world was one. There was no separateness. And I was part of it too. I felt connected to this oneness. And it lasted for a few hours. I remember the next morning I still felt it to a degree, but it faded away somewhat after that.
And why do you think it faded away?
Well, I think these experiences, unless a person switches into a kind of stable state of awakening, and these experiences tend to come and go. Well, you could look at it another way. I mean, I feel like I always have a basic essence, spiritual sensibility, which is always there, a sense of inner well-being, which is always there. But sometimes I'm taken away from it by stress, busyness. Usually, for me, it's usually when I get too busy and I'm rushing around and trying to do too many things, I get taken away from it. But I think when these experiences happen, they happen because there's a kind of a change to our psyche. Our psyche changes in a certain way. It shifts into a different state. But unless it's become a stable state, it always switches back into our ordinary psyche. There's a shift into this
So it's
higher state.
It's always there, and then it's activity and mind stuff or whatever takes you away from it somehow. So what do you feel? It's always there.
Yeah, I feel so. It's always there,
Yeah.
and quite a lot of the time I'm in contact with it, but it's quite easy to be taken away from it by stress and busyness. But at the same time, it's easy to get back into it as well. All I need to do is to slow down, relax, go for a walk in the park or the fields, and I can tune back into it. So it's always quite strong. But sometimes, it is easy to be taken away from it.
And there's another experience you mentioned. I just made some notes here from your book, which came at not a funny time, but unusual time, because you were in a band, and I think you were in Germany, you'd been out partying at 3 o'clock in the morning. You woke up, and they said you had a very powerful, harmonious force. Darkness, some notes I made, seems thick and solid, and the force was everywhere. Rather than me repeat it, why don't you talk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of the most powerful awakening experiences I've had. And strangely, it did come at a time in my life when I'd moved away from spirituality. I'd stopped meditating, I had stopped reading spiritual books, and I hadn't had many spiritual experiences for quite a long time before then. I'd really moved away into a more sort of hedonistic, typical musician's lifestyle. Drink and, well, not many drugs, but drink and, late nights and
Women and...
Well, yeah, of course. So I moved away from that. So this experience was like a calling back into my spiritual self, which I'd become a bit alienated from.
Yeah.